All right, so moving on to the next topic that we have touched upon briefly, namely purging old and outdated events, whether you should keep everything. So a little bit of background on our setup. We currently have in our event repository 2.2 giga events, or 2.2 billion, as we say in normal parlance. That's quite a few events, and test events make up not quite the majority, I think, but around half. So 400 million something test case triggered, about as many test case started, and almost as many test case finished. That's a lot of test events, and most of them are not very interesting today. To look at the sizes of the database indexes, we talked about that database indexes over lunch, actually. So just the test case started, those are the largest indexes, 70 gigabytes of just indexes, and in total over 300 gigabytes. That's pretty expensive for maintaining this. So especially considering, for some of these events, you could argue that maybe they would be interesting to keep for some time. Test events, we can't possibly have so many million interesting test events. Not a chance. So this is all going all the way back to 2019, maybe, or whenever we started storing the events. So it's a few years back. So what's the problem then? Can't we just delete everything older than a certain cutoff date? Well, not all events are created equal. Some events, for example, those pertaining to customer releases, maybe you want to keep them around. Maybe you have to keep them around for a number of years, depending on how you use the events and what your compliance requirements are. But test events for pre-integration tests or something, they probably start to become irrelevant after maybe just a few weeks or a few months, but certainly not 5 years. And unfortunately, you can't determine the needed retention policy by just looking at one test event, because maybe you could, but in most cases, at least in our case, you don't know, was this a test of a release artifact or something that has gone to a customer, for example. We have no idea by just looking at a single event. So we have to have something a little bit more sophisticated. So what I'm thinking is the desired behavior, at least for us, is delete test events older than a certain number of days, maybe half a year, maybe 1 year, if those test events are not reachable by a confidence level modified event that indicates a customer release. In other words, is there a path from a confidence level modified like this to an artifact that is linked to from a test case event? And that isn't entirely trivial depending on your event repository. If you do run a graph database, this should be very, very simple. Just phrase a suitable graph query and you should be done. Maybe you'll have to add an index or two maybe to make it efficient, but it shouldn't pose any problems anyway. But if you just store them in MongoDB like we do, you would have to do it in a different way. So sort of the naive implementation would be to just periodically, maybe every night, you just pull all the old test events and from each such event, traverse the graph, make graph lookups to figure out, is there a confidence level modified that links, we get this one, we have to look, is there a link to this artifact? Does this artifact in turn link to confidence level modified? Possibly multiple steps. Now, you could use caching to speed this up a bit, since there are going to be many test events that go through the same artifact, for example. So there are definitely optimizations to be made there, but I'm guessing it's still probably going to be pretty expensive. So what we're going to implement in the next few months is, I call it a mark and sweep algorithm that I'm going to describe. So in doing this, we continuously listen to the events as they arrive, and when something happens, like a confidence level modified, that places a verdict, like the releasable or whatever you call it, some kind of confidence level that should mark the artifacts and its tests as important and something that should be kept. You would store those events in a ledger that you keep around for later. This ledger could be any kind of database, really, but it could be pretty long. So depending on, speed versus how much memory you wanted to use, you might want to choose wisely. I've played around a little bit with using a Bloom filter, since that's extremely efficient for checking or for storing sets of data and being able to check if something is in that set. So this could be then a set of events. So while it's extremely efficient, there's also the possibility of false positives. In other words, you ask if this event is part of the set. There is a possibility that it's going to say, yes, it's part of the set. It is an important event, even though it isn't. I don't think that's a problem, because the consequence is going to be that we keep around some test events that should have been deleted, but aren't. But this isn't a matter of like personal information, GDPR, that we really have to remove after a certain time. This is just, we remove it because we're not interested in them anymore. So I don't think that's a real problem. And I did some computation on the memory requirements, and Redis has a Bloom filter type that you can use. And if we want to check, we want to store a set of 100 million events with the IDs of the events, and we want the chance of a false positive to be, I think, 0.1% or something, which I think is pretty acceptable. Then that's going to require 170 megs of RAM, which is like nothing. So it's very, very efficient. But again, it's possible that you can use just a much, much simpler set of simpler data structure for storing these events. So what would then happen when you get a confidence level modified that places a releasable verdict on something? You would then, as that event arrives, you would follow it to see what is it stating an opinion about. Probably an artifact, but could be another confidence level modified, possibly. That artifact, because it is linked by this confidence level modified, put it in the ledger, because clearly that artifact is a releasable artifact. We want to keep the information about it. It could contain digests of the files involved, and so on. We then follow it to any tests that are run against that artifact. Same thing there, store it in the ledger. You probably only need to store the test case triggered, not the other test events, because they sort of belong together. And you can do the lookup and locate the other test events that go together with the trigger as you're deleting them. That keeps the size of the ledger smaller, but then you have to do more work when you're deleting it. So I guess you can do either way there. Everything clear so far? Good. And then the sweeping, which is the periodic once a night or whatever frequency you choose. Then you extract all the test case triggered events, and it will be a very quick lookup to see if they are in the ledger. If they are, delete them, find any other related test events, and delete them, and finally delete the entry in the ledger, and you're done. And that should be much more efficient than the sort of more brute force deletion, and should still be quite simple to implement. And this should allow us to vastly decrease our events. I looked at, so far we haven't really been adding all our tests to, they are not published as IFL events, but turns out we run 4 million tests a day right now. So that's 12 million test events per day, and that in 6 months, that's more than all the events we currently have, 2 billion. So we really have to do something now to keep the events under control. So that's That's about to happen. The Eiffel event publishing for all our tests. Questions and thoughts? Yes.
One question: is there a possibility that there would be test cases not yet in the ledger that could happen to be at a later stage? Is that the way of working thing? Do we always release latest stuff? Or could it happen that
Right.
all the test cases would be in the ledger at a later point?
I don't think that's going to be a problem for us, but theoretically it could happen, depending on, of course, how quickly you remove events. If you only want to keep the event for like 1 month, but the release decision comes after 2 months, then you have a problem.
Because we are removing those who hasn't been marked.
Yeah.
We make a negative assumption.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is correct. This algorithm would break down if the retention time would be kept so short that you maybe not even know whether they should be kept. But that's sort of, I don't know if that's a problem with the algorithm. It's more a problem of, the policy itself doesn't. Yeah. If you don't know after a month if it's going to be released, then you can't possibly delete.
So it's something to keep in mind.
Yes, that's right. And yes.
Otherwise, good, I think.
I think should be reasonable. This is something that I think we should be able to open source as well. It's not going to be anything access specific about it. And because of the standardized event lookup API, this is something that could be usable for other companies too.
Certainly should be needed in some of our domains, but I'm thinking that it could be different ways or to decide what to be thrown away. We don't really know what they're going to need there or in the different domains. It's probably, I know we have domains where we can't send all the messages that should be sent because that would kill the whole DER.
Yeah.
So that's certainly something that would be very good to implement, but I don't know what they need and not.
No,
I think that has to be checked with each user community.
That's the important. The thing that makes it hard, or potentially hard to, not hard to open source per se, but to make it really useful would be the policy for this. What should it be? That needs to be configurable, and in your case, it could be different between different domains. Definitely between different companies and timing and all that. So, and making that configurable and flexible enough for everyone without being, more complicated than the rest of the whole service. I don't know if that's possible. Then you're into the whole territory of expressing, graph relationships and attributes on the nodes and all, evaluating that, and then you probably want to be running like in Neo4j or something anyway. So I don't know if it's possible, but still, it could be, even if the implementation is pretty fixed, it could still be useful. You would have to like fork it and implement your own policies, but it's still, you get the rest of the functionality at least, and then you only have to implement the actual algorithm, which is small for a specific use case, but not the generic.
Are you planning to public ledger only for new events, or are you going to go back in time and do one-time shot?
I'm going to have to go back in time, yes.
Okay.
So probably I'll just scan through the whole MongoDB database and feed it to the queue where the service is running, and it wouldn't know about actually it being old events. It would just treat it as new and then populate the ledger. That's probably what I'm going to do. It's going to take a while for that backfill operation, but if it runs for a couple of weeks, it doesn't matter. And it should be a very quick operation.
Redundant.
Pardon?
pretty elegant solution, actually.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
And it should definitely, again, not be a problem scaling it to large volumes.
Just a matter of time.
Yes. Yes. All right. Very good. Thank you.